Olympians, Zeus and the other gods. May you introduce yourself?
All right, yeah, hi, my name is George O'Connor. I do the Olympian series, among other things. There's 5 volumes so far. There's Zeus, Athena, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. This is the upcoming 6th volume, Aphrodite. It comes at the end of the year, so I brought an unbound copy to show people. I'm working on book 7 about Ares, god of war, coming up. It's going to be very bloody. Should be fun.
So, how did you get started? We'll start from the beginning.
I come into comics through, I broke into children's books first, like doing picture books. Like here's an upcoming picture book of mine from Candlewick Press. But yeah, kind of like a story about a little girl and her cat, but with a dinosaur instead of a cat. So I broke into doing children's books first, and then from there I segued into doing comics, because I was always doing kind of comics-influenced picture books. And I did a book called Journey into Mohawk Country as my first graphic novel. Journey to Mohawk Country is a non-fiction book. Its text was actually written by a guy named Harman Meinders van den Bogart in 1634. He was a Dutch explorer, and this is his real account of the Mohawk Indians from 1634.
So it's safe to say you're a history buff.
Big history buff, yeah. Anything old, Greek myths, 1634. If it happened recently, I just don't even know about it. It's pretty sad.
So these stories, are they just separate stories, or is it continuous?
There's kind of, in the Olympian series, there's a thread that you can definitely follow through the entire thing. It's like the story. Zeus is the central character. It's his ascendancy to the king of the gods through the Olympian era. But then each volume is designed to stand on its own. So if like you're really into Hera, you can just read the Hera book and not have to read any of the other volumes.
So how did you do comics before the Olympian series, or was this your?
Well, first comic that I admit to is Journey to Mohawk Country. When I was in college, I did some biography comics and things under various pseudonyms that I'll never admit to, and you'll never find out about them. But this was kind of my first big comic work. And then I did this book too, Ball Peen Hammer, which is written by the playwright Adam Rapp. Very, very dark. It's for adults. It's a little different than the other ones, but very, very depressing. And I've been doing the Olympians, which I don't know if I mentioned, it's going to be a 12-book series, so that's keeping me busy for quite a few years.
Do you have it all planned out beforehand?
Yeah, there's this big Excel spreadsheet I have of the whole thing. There's been some changes here and there, like sometimes a story will get bumped or moved to another volume, but it's a 12-volume overarching story telling as much of the Greek myths as I can.
And so, why the Greek myths? Why a comic about the Olympians?
Oh, well, that's a great question. When I was a kid, in about 4th grade, we spent like half a year studying Greek mythology, and that was my first intro to this sort of thing. I always liked to draw and tell stories. Reading Greek mythology was this huge thing for me. And from there, I got into Norse mythology, and then a few years later, my mom bought me a Mighty Thor comic book. When Walt Simonson was doing it, and that was my intro into comics, really. And that's how I got into comics, was by mythology. So for me, it always just seemed like the story of the Greek gods or the Norse gods or whatever, with all their powers and crazy stories. It's the same thing as superhero comics. So for me, I felt it's always been very connected, the two of them. So I'm like, hey, why not do a series? It was actually my editor's idea, which I'm embarrassed to admit. I didn't come up with this. It's like, why not do a series of graphic novels retelling the Greek myths? And I'm like, yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
And so, do you draw too?
I write, I draw, I color, I do I'm a big control freak. I do everything on these.
Oh wow! And,
yeah.
So how do you draw it? How's it done? Paper?
Yeah, I still mostly I use paper, like on Bristol plate, and I use an old-fashioned dip pen, and I use paintbrushes. Then there's also a bit of digital trickery in here. There's a lot of digital tweaks and such. And the coloring is all done in Adobe Photoshop, which is, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. It's like the greatest program ever. But yeah, and then, so it's a combination, like there's actually, I didn't bring them because they're heavy, but there's a combination of original artwork and digital stuff to make up the Olympians.
Super cool. And how is it putting together each book? Is it just like pulling from a large pool, or is it more like exactly what you're going to do? Because I'm sure there's tons of stories.
There's tons, and I try to come up with a central theme for each book, so that helps determine what the stories are. and a lot of them, they change as I write them. Like, I'm working on the Ares book right now, and that one's becoming, like, he's not a sympathetic god. He's kind of a murdering maniac. But I've managed to find a thread that makes him very sympathetic. It's set during the Trojan War, and he loses children in that war. And that whole story is kind of about, like, how Zeus engineered this war to kind of kill off the Age of Heroes, and Ares is suffering from it. He's losing his kids. And so it's like I try to find a thread that makes these characters... You know, the Greeks were really smart. When they created their gods, that's the first time they really give gods a human personality. They're basically an abstracted family. So I try to find the humanistic trait of these gods and really use that as the focus for each volume.
But you did children's books before, right?
Yeah.
Like, how was it?
I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 of your own. And then you can take that.
People would argue I do it all ages, so I'm like really creative in the way I handle some of the more sexy versions. In Zeus, there's the bit where Zeus's dad, Kronos, castrates his grandfather, Aranos, the sky. And now you could have a picture of a guy taking a sickle and cutting off an old man's junk, but that's not very subtle. So instead, I picture Aranos, the sky, is literally the sky, and Kronos slices it open and this light pours through. Let me find the panel.
Here, take the other one.
So here's the page in question, right? So this is, I think, a much more exciting and poetic image than an old man getting hit in the crotch. And then the line for it is actually, it says, his power, he cut open the sky, and Aranos' power bled away. He was led impotent. So an adult can get what's going on. So I have a lot of adult fans, I have a lot of kid fans, but I'd say kids form the backbone of it.
So do you consider yourself a children's writer, or is it more...
I would consider myself more of a children's writer but I think real good children's writing is done for all ages. When you read a great children's book, like, say, Marie Sendak, not that I'm comparing myself to that level, but when you read a great book like that, it's just a great piece of writing. It doesn't have anything to do with the intended age, and he doesn't pull any punches. It's just, I think mythology in general lends itself to that sort of uncluttered, really straightforward storytelling, which is very easy to do with kids. Not easy, but lends itself towards kid storytelling. It's very pure, just boom. So I try to go for that.
So when you were transitioning from children's book to comics, did you already have this publishing, or did you have to send off the publishers as well?
No, I was lucky enough that I was already publishing some picture books with a publisher called Roaring Brook, who is the parent company of First Second, who publishes my graphic novels. So I already had a great working relationship with my editor, and it was through a conversation with him, he kind of suggested this, so we were able to work on doing the series. So I was very fortunate to be able to find a home for this. It's the sort of thing, like maybe 5 years ago in the comics industry, a little bit more, maybe 7 years ago in the comics industry, I don't think there would have been a home for this, but now comics have blown up in the general market in a way they never have before. So I'm getting to do my dream job, and I'm super excited about it.
So would you have anything to plug before we wrap?
By the Olympians, Volume 6, Aphrodite, coming out at the end of the year. I'll be doing a lot of promos, especially in this area, come in February for that. Look me up online. George the Mighty on Twitter, at George the Mighty. I have an author page on Facebook, and GeorgeO'ConnorBooks.com.